The fishing news is brought to you by Interlux Marine Paint, Fanatics of Ocean City, Maxima Fishing Line, and Okuma.
Here in the parking lot of Viking Village in Barnegat Light, where I expect this place is going to be a bustle of activity on Saturday, October 22nd. Here in front of the Carolyn Ann 3, not far from the Miss Barnegat Light, the Super Chick, and of course the Mary M4. If you're expecting to get out there on the sea bass grounds on Saturday, I would advise you to get here early to grab your spot along the rail. I'm Jim Hutchinson with the New Jersey Delaware Bay edition of the Fisherman magazine, from the Highlands and Atlantic Highlands down through Shark River, Manasquan, here down to Cape May, and of course all the way down to Lewis Harbor and Indian River Inlet. The big news this Saturday, of course, is the increase in bag limit and the return of the black sea bass season. A 15 fish bag limit for both New Jersey and Delaware. Now, earlier this week, I mistakenly told folks in New Jersey that you had a 12.5-inch size limit. It's actually 13 inches starting Saturday here in New Jersey. Delaware, it's 12.5 inches, but boats like the Mimi 6, of course, with angler Bob Kahns here, he'll show you that that extra half an inch doesn't mean that much. It doesn't mean that much, seriously, because it's been so long since we've been on the black sea bass grounds that I expect those humpbacks to be big and plentiful. That's what everybody's waiting for. Now, expect strong westerlies this weekend. Friday, a bit of a heave expected as well. So if you're looking to get out there on the sea bass grounds, make sure to check with your boats on Friday to find out the schedule, make sure they're still sailing. And of course, don't forget to bring those giant knuckleheads back in for weigh-in. I know the folks at the mates are going to be very busy on the weigh-in cleaning fish, but if you get one of those big humpbacks, don't forget 6.22 pounds stands right now as the biggest black sea bass on our Fisherman magazine Dreamboat leaderboard, but a 5.3 or better will get you on that leaderboard and put you in the running for that cobia center console at the end of the year. Now, I would expect that between porgies, black sea bass, and some of those jumbo bluefish that have arrived, that those are the fish that are really going to mean a difference in this year's Dreamboat contest. So don't forget, make sure you know where your registered weigh-in stations are, and you Fisherman subscribers, don't forget to weigh in those fish. Another big story, of course, is moving on to the striped bass, and some big striped bass have arrived here along the Jersey coast. Now, Pete Wagner from the Hyper Striper told me earlier this week, nicer fish are finally showing. He had Dr. Manav Sacker on earlier this week for a 46-pounder. Now, that was out of the Highlands. The biggest fish seem to be on the troll right now. John Stavola with Paul Bennett and Captain Kenny Gallup, they had some big stripers. Earlier in the week, the Maja number 4 off Monmouth County. Ed Plickta, nearby here, checked in with Lacey Marine. He had a good striper off Seaside. Maja number 4. You see what I'm getting at. The trolling is working. Parker Pete up in Belmar got into a mix of fish over the weekend, and to start the week, he was on those umbrellas. So break out the umbrellas, break out those shads, the stretches, the rapalas, the mojos, and of course the Maja spoons. And remember your line, folks. The fence is 3 miles. That federal limit is 3 miles out. The Coast Guard is looking around this season, so don't be looking for stripers outside that 3-mile limit. So if you're out there this season, walk the line, folks. We see this all the time this type of year, folks trolling wire right along the line or hitting some of those fish. Now, Mike Hollowitz contacted me on Wednesday, said there might have been fish there early in the week. Tuesday, he was all over the place in Monmouth County. Most of the boats couldn't find a bite. So again, those fish move. So if the first wave of good stripers move through Monmouth County, you would expect them to be somewhere from here in Barnegat Light on down into South Jersey, but we're expecting more in terms of the waves of big stripers. And with these heavy offshore winds blowing so tough out of the west this weekend, with those winds, it could be worth it to stay in tight along the coast and look for some of that bait. There's been plenty of bird play in North Jersey, up along the Monmouth County, off Sandy Hook, and especially inside Raritan Bay. Folks throwing those jigs and those soft plastics for a lot of stripers. Now, a lot of small fish, but look for the bird play and get in on it. Now, along the front beaches, surfcasters have been throwing plugs. They've been throwing the darters and the poppers, of course, bucktails and the heavy heave. Jimmy Finn here He took over top slot in the LBI Derby on Wednesday, weighing in a 33.4-pound striper at Jingles Bait and Tackle in Beach Haven. He was throwing fresh bunker at night, high tide. So it was a good body of fish moved in here in South Jersey. And meanwhile, down in South Jersey, you know, a lot of folks think, well, we don't get that run of fish. Well, we had a good report earlier in the week when Don Miller brought a 50-inch, 42-pound striper into hands 2 that he caught on fresh bunker off the Cape May beach. Now, the jetty and sod bank action continues to be hot and heavy on those tog. We don't get that big bag limit in New Jersey until November, but a lot of good action inshore, whether it's greenies and white leggers, although one thing that I've found too is working those sod banks, the clam works especially well, especially if you get in close to the sod banks to fish. No, not that close. I'm not talking about that close, but again, some of these sod banks where you have a deep edge, that one fish bag limit can be secured pretty quickly by fishing green crab or clam for some of those togs. And while you're working those sod banks in Central and South Jersey, don't forget to throw some of those poppers as well, because there's some good striper action along those sedges. The offshore forecast for this weekend, not so pleasant. Saturday into Sunday, heavy winds and a big tropical swell. And it's a shame, too, because we're finding that we're finally getting in on some of that tuna action. The Miss Barnegat Light has been doing well offshore. Guys like Nick Newberg of the Benchmark, putting folks like Steve Toth, his dad, and friend Rick on the tuna between these weather fits. And a couple of good sharks were found offshore, too. I've got more on that. A 400-pound mako was weighed in just the other day. I've got more of that, a great photo of that giant shark. It's coming up in next week's edition of the Fisherman magazine. It's our November edition, folks. We're getting into the final stretch of the 2016 season, especially that dream boat. So get all the details on that, the togging action. I've got beach and boat striper action. It's all written up in that November edition. Look for it next week, and I will see you again next week at thefisherman.com.
The fishing news is brought to you by Interlux Marine Paint, Fanatics of Ocean City, Maxima Fishing Line, and Okuma.